Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magic in Media, the podcast brought to you by the Vibe Collective and me, Carly D, a reader and manager here at the Vibe Collective. Now, this podcast blends magic with the current pop culture news and moments to show you that magic is all around us every day. We just have to look around and find it. So we find the metaphysical and the magic in the world all around us, and we share it with you. So thank you for joining us today. We are officially out of the Mercury retrograde we have been in November. So cheers to that. And the Gemini Full Moon is here this week. So we are going to start this week's episode of Magic in Media with a quick little astrology breakdown of what that really means for all of us as a collective, what we're feeling in the world, and the general vibe. So we've talked about how Mercury retrograde is this time of kind of stagnant energy, stalled, not a lot of things moving forward. So that's what we've been feeling lots of this November. Now, we are coming out of that as we go into December. So things should start to feel a little bit easier. But if you had some hard times with travel, technology, and communication in November, that is to be expected with the Mercury retrograde. Now, about our Gemini full moon. So we are recording this podcast on the 3rd. The Gemini full moon is the 4th tomorrow, and I am the resident Gemini here at the Vibe Collective. So let's talk a little bit about how that sign affects this full moon. So Geminis are known for being talkative, social, information gathering, and they're really big thinkers, right? Like they're ruled by Mercury, which is a lot of, what's kind of cool too is we're coming out of this Mercury retrograde into a full moon in a sign that's ruled by Mercury. So again, lots of thinking about information, how we're spreading information is going to be a huge part of this full moon. And when I say spreading information, it's like, how are we getting our news? Are we getting it through our phones? Are we talking to the community around us? Like, how are we actively spreading the information that we want to, not only general information, but maybe information about causes that mean a lot to you or your business or some new startup or idea that you have. So again, Geminis are big thinkers. So a lot of what we're going to be feeling this week is very kind of cerebral in our minds. Geminis are an air sign. And again, air has this kind of like thoughtfulness, thought cloud energy almost of thinking a lot. But of the air signs, the Geminis are also the talkers. They're the chatters. They need to talk things through. So you may need to talk some of your ideas through. And if you don't feel comfortable having that conversation with someone, talk it through with yourself, right? Take notes or maybe even just take a video of yourself and a new idea that you're having so you can kind of ruminate on it, go back to it, and just let those cerebral wheels be turning this week. So with our Gemini full moon on December 4th, let's focus on information, processing, slowing down and thinking, and really listening to process the information. Thinking of new information and how we're going to spread it. So don't isolate. Be a little social, even if you have hermit energy this week. And that doesn't mean you need to go out in public and, talk to a bunch of people and be really social in that way. Maybe you just send out a few extra text messages to family and friends, or maybe you do a virtual meetup or a virtual session with the Vibe Collective. Just something to get yourself out of isolation and connecting with other people and connecting with your community. So with these cold winter months, you may be feeling a little more crab hermit, like want to go in my shell energy. But I do encourage you this week to be a little social, get some conversation started, just so you can get thinking a little bit more. Geminis thrive on spreading information to others and talking things through. So how else can you do that in your life, right? What are other new inventive ways besides just talking to kind of that same circle of family and friends that we can process and spread more information? So really let that be your focus of the Gemini full moon this week. How else can we thrive by spreading information and talking things through. Okay? So we have a lot to reflect on, which we're going to talk about reflection a little bit more at the end of our podcast too, as what you can do this week to tap into the magic around you. So stick around to the end of the podcast to see how we're tying that into reflecting. But something I wanted to do for us this week that is a little new on this podcast is my favorite full moon, or really any moon, full moon or new moon, tarot spread, because it's really simple. It's 2-card spread, keep it nice and easy. And the first card is what is being illuminated or lit up or shown to me by this moon cycle, or in this case, this full moon. And the second card is what is hiding in the shadows? What is in the subconscious? What am I not seeing that is important and something I need to pay attention to during this full moon? So I actually am going to pull 2 cards for us, one for each of those prompts as a collective, so we can see live in this podcast what is being illuminated and what is hiding in the shadows. So I am going to pull out my favorite tarot deck, our Way Home Tarot, which is available in the Vibe Shop. This is an independent deck, so it's not one you can purchase at Barnes & Noble or through Amazon or big boxes. It is an independent deck sold mostly through like magic stores and those who know about it. So it makes it a little more special and exclusive, but also just the symbolism, the art in this deck is beautiful. It really speaks to me. It's one of my most commonly used decks. So I'm really excited to share it with you all on Magic and Media this week. So let's pull those 2 cards and see what this Gemini full moon is trying to show us. So we've got our 2 cards pulled here, and let's see what we're working with. Our first card, what is being illuminated, what is being shown to us this full moon, is the 8 of Pentacles. And our what is hiding in our subconscious, what is kind of being hidden or needs to be shown more, paying more attention to in this full moon. And we got the Mother of Swords. So these are our 2 cards here. What is being highlighted? The 8 of Pentacles. And what is being hidden in the shadows? The Mother of Swords. So this is very interesting. What's being illuminated for a lot of us is work, right? 8 of Pentacles is work, or what I call purpose in a lot of my readings. And this is the idea of really putting our nose down and getting the work done that we need to. And I think that with this full moon, we all have felt like that Mercury and retrograde muck that we're finally coming out of. And we're being met with this Gemini full moon, which is again ruled by Mercury and kind of is taking those traits or those things that we haven't been feeling or struggling with this month and shining a big light on them. So how I am reading this card for us, this 8 of Pentacles, is that work is going to be a focus, especially as we go into the year. Earlier in the podcast, like I said, we're going to be processing information and new ideas. And for a lot of us, this may be business related or purpose or job related. So start talking about what we want to bring into 2026. This is going to be a year of the horse in 2026. So lots of forward moving energy, high momentum, and really pushing through with these new ideas. So I do think we are going to have a lot of focus on our purpose, our jobs, our businesses, what we want to create and bring into the world, into the physical, and how that affects us really with working. I think a lot of us are going to see a difference in how we think about work and approach work going into the new year. So this full moon, our last full moon of the year, is really going to get us thinking, like we've been saying, about that kind of stuff. Let me take a quick little sip of tea. Gotta have that throat chakra, throat bliss tea I drink every time we do this podcast. Now, let's talk about what is being hidden or what's in the shadows. What do we need to pay attention to? And this, my friends, Mother of Swords, is how we communicate. how we communicate with those around us needs to have a little more attention paid to it. So the Mother of Swords, or the Queen of Swords in the tarot, kind of has a reputation for being cold, a little maybe stuck up, like nose up, not really saying things very nicely all the time. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it even has a very like cold icicle figure around this archetype in the tarot. So I do think that this is calling us to maybe speak with a little more love, a little more thought, a little more intention, especially with those that are close around us. There are things we need to hone in on, improve a little bit more on in our communication style. And what this is really showing me is hidden in our subconscious right now, maybe something a lot of us aren't paying attention to, is how we're getting our messages out there. Are we really telling people what we need? Are we really getting our points across the way that we need to? Where do we need to work on or improve on our communication? And that's what I think is something that we're maybe not paying as much attention to, and we should. So that is our little mini tarot reading for Magic and Media for our Gemini full moon. So I hope that you take with you the message to get your business ideas out there, spread that information, be a flowing fountain of information when it comes to the things that you want to build and you're passionate about. But also keep in mind, how am I communicating? How am I talking about my feelings with the people who are really close to me? And am I being heard the way I want to be heard? Or am I needing to improve my communication style, right? I always say, are people hearing me, like physically hearing me, or are they hearing me, like understanding me? And I think that maybe there's been a little disconnect for that for a lot of us lately. So let's think about how we can take actions as an individual and improve our communication. So that was really fun. I love doing a little on the fly tarot reading like that. So I hope that you all enjoyed. And if you ever have questions about our tarot services with the Vibe Collective, let us know. But myself and Jenny and Carly L, we all offer tarot readings several days a week through the Vibe Collective. So if you want your own personal message, personal tarot reading, book with us at our website, www.thevibecollective.co. Now, we've covered our kind of astrology check-in, what we're feeling coming out of that Mercury retrograde and with that full moon this week. But I also wanted to touch on the fact that one of my predictions from 2 weeks ago ended up coming true. So this was the prediction that Whitney Leavitt from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives would leave kind of the past, this reality TV show beginning she's had in her past, and move on to more scripted work, whether that be shows, movies, and I even said ultimately Broadway. So this Monday, which was December 1st, first day after the retrograde, I always think it's kind of interesting when we see big news like this coming out in the media. But after the retrograde on December 1st, Whitney did announce she is going to star as Roxy Hart in Chicago, on Broadway in New York City. So just like we predicted, she is moving from her roots onto bigger and better things, and she will be on Broadway. Now, another thing I want to point out that was really interesting about this is that when we talked about this initially, it was the Scorpio new moon, so the start of this moon cycle. Now, this week we are in the Gemini full moon, so we really saw this manifestation come to fruition through this moon cycle, from that Scorpio new moon to this Gemini full moon. So I always think it's cool to think back to where we were when that Scorpio new moon was starting and how it's affecting us, because we can see with Whitney that, you know, leaving Dancing with the Stars was probably the best thing for her, and now she has this new manifestation and beginning starting on Broadway. So think about where you were 2 weeks ago with that Scorpio new moon, and what wishes and manifestations are coming true for you in this same moon cycle. Again, that's really cool ways to just see how astrology connects and where those common threads kind of all come together. So really cool to see a production from this podcast come true, come all the way to fruition. And congratulations to Whitney on her new start on Broadway. So definitely go back and check out that podcast episode 2 weeks ago. And it has Dancing with the Stars and the Scorpio new moon. So we love to see that. Now, I do want to touch on our winter solstice season coming up and give you all a little mini winter solstice lesson. So as we get closer to the solstice and you hear people start to talk about it or bring it up, you already have an idea of what's going on and what the winter solstice really means. So the winter solstice is the time of the year when the hemisphere is tilted farthest away from the sun, so making it the shortest days and the longest nights. And we are already feeling that. Lots of us, it's getting colder here, it's getting darker sooner, and it really is just this switch of the time of year where we're going from fall into like the full darkness, the winter months. So there is a big emphasis on light. You'll notice as we talk about the winter solstice, candles, fires, being the light, lanterns, and our connection to light during this time of darkness. So we are waiting for the sun to return essentially when the winter solstice is happening. So we must find light in other places. And there is a bit of a connection here too, even with that lots of people feel down. Maybe your mood or mental health takes a bit of a decline in those winter months. Not only do we need to find the physical light, by lighting fires and having candles and putting the heat on more in our house, we need to find the light within, or the light around us, the positivity that moves us forward and brings us forward, which luckily we see a lot of in the traditions around winter solstice, like Christmas, Hanukkah. So all the holidays line up really close to when the solstice is, which is around December 20th or December 21st. And again, that's when we see Christmas, that's when we see Hanukkah and all those common kind of religious holidays. And again, in those holidays, we can all acknowledge there's a big emphasis on light, lighting the menorah in the Jewish tradition, having lights on the Christmas tree for the Christmas tradition. So we're already seeing that connection with light show up a lot. So this is really a time to think about stillness as well, and standing still and reflecting. So we do more reflecting at the end of the year as well. That kind of ties into our element of stillness here and really paying attention to what we have built this year and as we get to the end to it in winter time. So think of the solstice as a doorway between the dark and the light. We're going to the longest night, not as much sunlight, much shorter days. We have a deep cold, which eventually will thaw as well, but we are in this deep cold right now. So it really is a time of rest before we get to renewal. So again, think of this as the doorway from going from fall into winter. And eventually that doorway, of course, will go from winter into spring when we feel that renewal. But the solstice in this winter time is a time of rest, is a time of stillness, is a time to go inward and kind of embrace the coldness that's calling us to kind of sit still and pay attention to what's happening within. Nature also feels different this time. There is like a hush, I would say, we feel when there's snow and just, even the sound is affected around us when there's lots of snow and it's getting colder, but it creates this kind of sense of enchantment too. So maybe as we get closer to the winter solstice, you'll find that you can bring a little more of that magic, right, into your life by embracing that enchanting time, lighting more candles. Maybe you light more intention candles, or you focus on the element of fire and how that can help you in your practice or your spiritual journey. So this is a good time to explore that element, right? Lean more into fire and how it can help you as we're in these cold months. Now, this is also, I would say, a time where we feel really connected as a world. I think a lot of it has to do with the holidays. There's a deeper connection, a deeper magical experience this time of year. I think a lot of us can kind of call on and connect to. So that is our little very mini winter solstice lesson of what it means as we get closer to it. We talked a lot about the light element using candles and things like that, but I would also say connect to nature more, right? Pine needles and Christmas trees and the Yule log and idea of stuff like that is very winter solstice-y and very just about connecting with that magic that is around us and how nature changes, especially if you're in a place that experiences the four seasons, we change as well, right? So honor this process of change, honor this doorway, of rest that we're walking into so we can feel renewed and ready to take on spring when we get to the spring equinox. So that is our very mini, like I said, winter solstice lesson. We will talk more about it, especially as we get in through December, but it is something I wanted to bring up at the top of this month so you can ease into it and we can learn more as we go through these December weeks. But let the big winter solstice mini lesson be light and embrace candles. So bring some candles, bring some fire into your house in a good way, in a warming way, in a comforting way, and let that winter solstice energy start to build up. Now, this week are what you can do this week. So what you can do this week to bring more magic into your life is reflect. And what really gave me the inspiration for this is our Spotify Wrapped is up. So if you're familiar with Spotify, it does a Wrapped at the end of every year of your profile of, the artist you've listened to the most, the songs you've listened to the most, the podcast you've listened to the most, and just kind of ultimately a reflection of what you've been consuming this year. And I think there's a very interesting correlation to the media that we consume and how it affects us and what it brings into our life. So as I was looking through my own Spotify Wrapped today, I was like, wow, this is literally such a collage of what I have personally been through this year, what kind of things you've turned to, what kind of interests were really sparked. And it is a really cool way to reflect on where you are now at the end of the year. And again, how that media or what kind of music or information you're consuming and how that affects you. So if you have Spotify and you're listening on Spotify, check out your Spotify Wrapped, see what albums you were listening to the most, what kind of topics were you consuming the most, and journal or reflect on these things. If you don't have Spotify Wrapped, then just take some time to think about what artists have I been listening to a lot? What shows have I been listening to a lot? You don't need a Spotify Wrapped to do this exercise, but I think just taking some time to embrace that stillness this time of year and reflect on where we're at can be very powerful. So again, think about what you have been consuming. Is there a new artist that has really spoke to you this year and is a different genre that you've listened to before? Does that correlate with something that happened to you earlier in the year? And where are you now? But if we're not reflecting and kind of taking the time to go inward and have some conversations with ourselves, then we won't really see where the change and where the growth is. So reflecting is a huge part of the spiritual journey. I think it's also very timely that this comes up as we are in a Gemini full moon this week, because the Gemini is the twin. They are the mirror. And if we're just going to be real about Geminis right now, as a Gemini, I know that they get a bad rep a lot of the time for kind of being crazy or being two-faced or anything like that. But I actually think that Geminis are the mirror for a lot of people in their life. So I want you to think about that. If you have a Gemini close to you or in your life, they often can be a mirror and kind of reflect back to you maybe some things you need to work on, maybe some things that you see in them that you aren't too fond of, that you see, reflected back of, am I doing that kind of thing? But Geminis are a huge mirror, right? They're the twins. So it's two people looking at each other. But something to think about for sure on a personal level, if you've noticed that about Geminis in your life. people say they don't like Geminis, but is it because the Gemini is reflecting back maybe things that they need to work on or that they're not too fond about themselves? There's a big kind of spiritual journey, and if someone is bothering you in the way they act or the way they move, the way they do things, then you need to take a deeper look inside yourself and why you are so bothered by that person, right? And I think that Gemini, and again, that reflection element of Gemini is very telling, very timely, as we get into this reflection end of the year kind of energy. It is very, very fitting that our last full moon of the year be a Gemini full moon as we go into this last month, because I think that if we really reflect on what's been going on this year for all of us, we will just have an even better 2026, because 2025 has been a year of the snake, a year of shedding, of releasing, of letting a lot of things go. So it's opened up a lot of space for people to bring new things into their life. And when we're bringing new things into our life, I do think we need to reflect and be mindful of what we're doing and what we're bringing in. We can't just have cleared all this space for newness in 2025 to just let any old thing in, right? So we need to reflect so we can really move from a better place, a more thoughtful place, a more designed place, and not just impulsively into the next thing. So set yourself up for success going into 2026 by really taking some time this year to see what we've done, where we've been, and where we are going. And that is really what we have for you this week for magic and media. So look up a little bit more about the solstice if that was speaking to you, if you're interested. You can go very deep into how that affects us as a culture, society, and how the darkness affects us in different areas of the world. Alaska, I had a lot of thoughts of that with the winter solstice, of they really experience like this darkness. So maybe we'll be talking about that and how different areas experience the solstice as we go through December. So that's all really interesting things we have to look forward to this month. But have a great full moon week. If you have any questions about what we're doing here at the Vibe Collective, what services we're offering, how to book your services, please reach out and let us know. We would love to talk to you and connect more. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Have a great week and find the magic in your own life. See you next time.